It's a tale as old as time. The battle between good and evil, light and dark. It's fascinated us for as long as we've had recorded history. This dichotomy has fathered religions and started wars. Recently, this battle was taken up by pageant queen Charles Vallow and Mormon fiction author Chad Daybell. Together, these two nut jobs killed Lori's family and Chad's wife. When this case first went public in 2019, no one could have guessed all of the turns it would take. In fact, the unbelievable story only recently came to a close, with Charles Vallow receiving 2 more life sentences from the state of Arizona for conspiracy to commit murder on top of the charges she received in Idaho for grand theft, conspiracy to commit murder, and murder. Hey guys! Welcome to the Crafty Crimes podcast. I have made the executive decision to start calling you my scissor sisters for no reason other than that I think it's funny. And I think you should think it's funny too, because it is. I don't know what else to say about that. Anyways, before I really get into the meat of this episode, I want to apologize to you for taking so long to get this video out. This video, I had everything ready and had it ready to go the first week of September. And when I went to export my finished product from the editor onto my computer so that I could then upload it to YouTube, something happened with the hard drive that everything was stored on, and it shit the bed, and I lost a good chunk of my content that I had for this video, as well as the video editor itself. So really the only thing I had was about an hour's worth of B-roll footage that was still saved onto my actual computer, thank God. But anyway, that's why this part of the video looks different than the rest of the video. I hope you enjoy my messy home. I was not going to set up my backdrop for 5 minutes worth of video recording. I hope you understand. But that's where I've been. I didn't just up and abandon the podcast or anything like that. I had technical difficulty after technical difficulty and after technical difficulty, and I basically just had to start everything over from scratch. So that's why it took so long. But a very big shout out to Mr. Crafty for helping my technology illiterate self get everything set back up and ready and working so that I could redo everything basically as quickly as possible. Without Mr. Crafty, this video would not be coming out right now, so drop a heart emoji on behalf of Mr. Crafty in the comments section. He would really appreciate it. But now that little PSA is out of the way, let's talk about Lori. Before she was the Doomsday Mom, she was an exemplary parent. Her family, her surviving son, especially Colby, described her as fiercely protective and incredibly nurturing. Her accomplice, Chad Daybell, had been a loving father to 5 children and an active member in his LDS church before his excommunication. Somehow, these two seemingly normal human beings on different ends of the country, mind you, met, and everything just spiraled into total chaos and madness from there in a span of like 2 years. And let me tell you, I think I actually felt some of my brain cells die reading what these two Tweedledums like had to say to each other and to the people around them. Like, some of it was genuinely painful to read. While we talk about the Lori Vallow case and all that's recently come to light, I'm going to continue working on the Daisy Square overalls for my daughter. To be totally transparent, as of the time I'm re-recording this episode, out of the 14 granny squares that I need for my project completed so far, so the next episode I'll be sewing them together and piecing them together, but I haven't worked on this project outside of recording for this podcast because I thought it might be nice to actually do a project start to finish with you for once instead of, I don't know, just hopping between projects as I do them for this. I don't know. I thought it would maybe feel a little more cohesive and a little more like we're, actually crafting buddies, because I want you to be my crafting buddy. For the sake of time, though, I'm not going to spend more time than necessary on Chad's and Lori's backgrounds. Just as the ideologies of the LDS influenced the kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart, they influenced the theologies that Chad and Lori would create and use to control their pseudo-cult. Between the insanity of events, the doctrine involved, and the extremely detailed timeline, there's simply too much to cover. In fact, there's so much to cover that I decided to split this episode into 2 parts because I didn't realize just how much there was to this case until I started my research. And y'all know me, I like to do my due diligence and over-explain everything, so I don't know, I guess just know that up until a certain point, Chad's and Lori's lives were relatively normal. Okay, so, yeah. Alrighty then, my scissor sisters. Get comfortable, grab your crafting supplies, and become bamboozled by the Doomsday Zombie Mom with me. Yeah? Lori Cox was born into a large and loving LDS family in Texas. Barry and Janice Cox, Lori's parents, described Lori as always being particularly spiritually sensitive, saying she took to the scriptures right away and admired people who she thought had a close relationship with Jesus. She was especially fascinated with the Mormon prophet Moroni, who is said to have presented the all-important golden plates to Joseph Smith, which were then translated into the Book of Mormon. Despite the family's closeness when the children were young, the siblings seem to have drifted apart over time. Lori married someone in a courthouse immediately after graduating high school. Marriage was short-lived. As far as I can tell, no one even bothered to learn his name or the reason for the divorce. But to be fair, the family didn't even, really get to meet the guy, so hard to know him when you don't get to meet him. Lori wasn't single for long. By 22, she had gotten remarried to a man named William Lagogia and had given birth to her first child, Colby. Colby was born in October of 1996, so you can do the mental math to figure out everyone's birth dates and all of that information if you want. I don't think it's important right now though, so I'm not going to, but you're more than welcome to. Lori stayed married to William for I don't know, about 3 years or so before she ended the marriage. Colby said William wasn't a great guy, but didn't really elaborate on that, probably because he was still a toddler when his parents split up. According to Lori's younger sister, Summer, the family wasn't invited to the wedding. According to Lori's younger sister, Summer, the family wasn't invited to this wedding either. Sometime between 2000 and 2002, Lori met and married a man named Joseph Ryan, once again neglecting to invite her relatives. Joseph adopted Colby and treated him well prior to, marrying Lori. In 2002, the couple welcomed Tylee into the world. Colby said his family finally felt complete. But not all that glitters is gold. Joseph had been sexually abusing Colby starting around the time Colby was 7 or 8. Everyone in the family already knew that Joseph was abusive towards Lori, but no one knew what was happening towards Colby yet. Even so, with just the abuse towards Lori being known, Annie, Joseph's younger sister, encouraged Lori to leave, immediately. In 2004, Lori appeared on Wheel of Fortune. Joseph's sister Annie said this was the first time she remembered Lori mentioning talking to God directly. Supposedly, Lori had been telling people that God had told her she'd appear on the show and win, and claiming God told her what letters to guess. So we can see she was already prophesizing before she met Chad. Shortly after the taping of her episode, Lori discovered that Joseph had been sexually abusing her son, and that is when she decided to leave. This is something Colby points to when he recalls how loving and protective his mother had once been. And not to worry, folks, Joseph Ryan did get what was coming to him for being a child predator. Lori's older brother, Alex Cox, tased Joseph in the balls for what he'd done to his nephew in the year 2007. Alex walked away from that interaction with a felony and a 90-day sentence. I think this is probably one of the few times I'll applaud violence. We don't support child predators on this channel, and if you do, then you're not welcome here. Following her divorce from Joseph Ryan, Lori became more active in the LDS Church to temper the murderous feelings she admitted to having towards her new ex-husband. Colby commented in the Netflix documentary Sins of Our Mother that he noticed a shift in his mother after he confessed to her what Joseph had been doing to him. Annie and Colby both agree that this was likely the beginning of the end for Lori. Where she had once seen love, life, and wonder in the world, she now saw doom and destruction. Her focus shifted from the love of the LDS doctrine and Jesus to dread and spiritual preparation for Armageddon. It's also so sad to know that Colby feels partially responsible for what happened to his family. And I hope he knows that it's not his fault at all. In true Lori fashion, she didn't stay single for long. In 2006, Lori married her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, after moving to Arizona to leave the past behind her. Charles wasn't Mormon when he met Lori, but he converted to the faith to be with her. And I think that's kind of sweet and romantic. This may have been the only wedding the family was invited to, but Summer, Lori's little sister, maintains that she never received any invitations to any wedding. Lori and Charles stayed married for nearly 13 years, making this Lori's longest-lasting relationship and establishing Charles as the father figure for her children. Charles had grown children from a previous marriage, and he traveled a lot for work. Colby and Tylee didn't have any contact with their respective biological dads, and I hope you can see that it was for good reason. Charles, I think, is the first genuinely decent man that Lori may have chosen to be with. But now that we've established Lori's background, let's check in with Chad Daybell. Chad's early life was quiet. He was raised in the LDS Church, and he was honestly considered an exemplary Mormon by his peers. As part of the church customs, newly adult members are required to go on a mission trip with the goal of converting folks to Mormonism. Chad and another young man from his temple were sent to New Jersey, of all places, for their trip in the mid-'80s. The man who went with Chad described him as quiet and charismatic. He even claimed that Chad set records for converting people during his first ever mission trip. Obviously, I don't know how much of this, if any, is hyperbole, but regardless, the point is that Chad was dedicated to the cause and genuinely believed the teachings of the Latter-day Saints, at least at this point in his life. Shortly after returning from his trip, Chad went cliff diving with some friends, and unfortunately, what happened that day would shape the rest of Chad's life. According to Chad, he had his first near-death experience when he hit his head during his dive. The collision with his noggin rendered him unconscious, which Chad claims opened him up to prophetic visions. Or, it could be that a guy just suffered a concussion and his oxygen-starved brain conjured images as he almost drowned. But, to each their own. People ascribe higher meaning to lots of life experiences. And unfortunately, this is allegedly just one of 2 near-death experiences for Chad, though the second near-death experience is unconfirmed. There is literally no information anywhere that I've found about it. But, who am I to argue with Chad about what he did and did not experience in his life? He very clearly is grounded in reality, and you will see what I mean going forward. Because of his near-death experiences, Chad believed the veil between life and death had been removed for him, allowing him to see the lives of everyone, past, present, and future. Meaning that every reincarnation a soul had previously and would have in the future, Chad could see. All of this information was contained within the Book of Life, which obviously, only Chad had access to. These near-death experiences and the visions they brought him were the backbone, the actual backbone of the pseudo-cult Chad and Lori would build together. Maybe Chad wasn't totally unhinged immediately after his concussion. Maybe it's something that came with time. Or maybe he was better at hiding it when he was younger than as he got older. Because he did marry Tammy Douglas in 1990, and their friends and fellow church members thought that they were just the perfect match and an ideal pair. Tammy's liveliness complemented Chad's quiet demeanor. And that's the thing everyone seems to remember about Tammy the most. She was the type of person who was genuinely kind and full of life. They described her as vivacious. The pair settled down in Salem, Idaho, and raised 5 children together there. Chad and Tammy had been married for almost 29 years when she was murdered. Prior to meeting Lori, Chad's only run-in with law enforcement was a speeding ticket in 2004. Like I said, he doesn't sound all that crazy and unstable yet, but Tammy can't tell us what's going on behind the scenes, and, maybe he was just mundane, Or maybe it took time for, his brain to eat itself and him to become stupid. I don't know. Anyway, Chad spent his days writing what most considered to be Christian fiction novels. But as time went on, his writing became more extreme, and he was dropped by his publisher. This prompted Chad to start his own publishing company, and just like that, Spring Creek Books Company was born. The idea was that Chad would publish his own books and the books of like-minded individuals that publishers didn't want to touch. The caveat was that they had to be writing about similar fringe topics as him. It was around this time that he was excommunicated from the LDS Church. And it's like, dude, it's bad when you get kicked out of an entire religion for having wacky visions in a religion that says it's okay to receive visions and divine information directly from God. Like, that should be your warning flag that you are so far, from the basis of reality that you need help. Like, if you're in something that says that these things are okay, and even they are like, nah, dude, you're taking this too far, I think it's time to reconsider. And that goes for, anything that you might be into, Anyway, the books Chad wrote weren't fiction for him. They were real visions that he had had, and he really did believe that they came from God. Julie Rowe, an author who used Chad's publishing company for her own books, and she even believes that Chad had always been on the outskirts of the fringe groups. She actively claims that she has insight into light and dark, and that Chad had worked for the dark side from the word go, basically. Take that information as you will. I know not everyone believes in mediums and the spirit realm, but I think it's worth noting that someone who had the same beliefs as Chad believed him to be evil. Chad wrote almost strictly about preparing spiritually and physically for the rapture, and appeared on various podcasts to talk about his ideas. His books directly influenced the Preparing a People podcast, hosted by none other than Lori Vallow herself and longtime friend Melanie Gibb. He would even be a guest on her podcast before this crazy story comes to a close. Okay, so now that we've established a brief history for the main characters, are you ready to dive into the insanity? In 2014, Charles, the fourth husband, and Lori formally adopted Charles's nephew, JJ. He had previously been in the care of Kay Woodcock, JJ's grandmother and Charles's sister, and her husband had been trying to take care of drug-addicted baby JJ, but
honestly, they just found themselves too old to properly care for him, especially with him having as many issues as he did as a baby. Charles, despite also being older, was in better health and had a younger wife to help. So, they were kind of the obvious choice here to adopt JJ. By all accounts, JJ absolutely lit up the world of the Vallow family. The family moved to Kauai, Hawaii in 2015. Lori loved the island. Family and friends from the mainland came to visit often and described Kauai as a paradise. Colby was in college at the time and visited his family, in Hawaii over the summer. It was while he was in college that Colby met his future wife, Kelsey. And this is where things start to get a little dicey. The Vallows had built a life for themselves on the picturesque Hawaiian shores. They embedded themselves within the LDS church on the island, making friends and attending socials. It was while attending a church event that Lori met her new best friend, April Raymond, and this woman was one of the first to see Lori's dark side. In a new land where nobody knew them, everyone around believed Charles and Lori were a good match. Their fellow community members believed they had the perfect marriage and believed them to be madly in love. But April Raymond, who spent a lot of time with Lori, never quite saw it that way. Lori and April spent a lot of time together talking about their lives, their problems, and spiritual insights, as friends do. According to April, Lori resented Charles because he wasn't as spiritually enlightened as she was. It was a real point of contention for her. She didn't see him as her spiritual equal, and that was something really important to her, and it seems like she wouldn't settle for anyone whose entire personality wasn't religion, Despite the frequent visits from family and friends, Tylee, Joseph and Lori's daughter, missed her old life. So the family packed up and moved back to Arizona in 2017. Obviously, Lori and Charles kept in touch with April Raymond and the rest of their friends back on the island. So I guess that's as close to the best of both worlds as everyone could get. But do you wonder if Lori's life would have taken the same path if she had stayed in Kauai? Or do you think that she would have ended up down the same rabbit hole eventually? Her return to Arizona sparked the crazy that would ensue. Upon her return to the mainland, she began reading Chad Daybell's books and became just enchanted by his stories of what's beyond the veil. April claimed this was around the time when Lori began to talk about having had several past lives and communing with the dead. Now, the LDS Church actually does endorse communication with the dead as a possibility, but it's not really practiced often, and it's typically reserved for those who are high up in the priesthood, not just anybody can do it. And I guess on some occasions in some mainstream churches, they hold baptisms for dead people, which I think is weird, but whatever. That aside, though, they definitely do not believe in past and future lives, as the afterlife is kind of the most important piece of the doctrine. I mean, murdering your children isn't really part of the LDS doctrine either, so I don't think Lori was too concerned with that, but it's just a weird piece of the religion to pull from, I guess, is my point here. I feel like it's worth discussing briefly why the Mormon religion seems to produce so many fringe religious offshoots and cults. Remember the prophet that Lori was obsessed with as a kid, Moroni? Well, he handed Joseph Smith the gold tablets that were then translated into the Book of Mormon. But Joseph Smith couldn't translate all of them, so some of the tablets still have divine writing on them that Mormons believe will be translated by the next prophet. So the idea that there's a new prophet coming and the idea that anyone can receive messages from God really opens up the religion for abuse, in my opinion. And Chad most definitely took advantage of this. It's easy to see how Chad's ideas influenced Lori even before they met. April claims she remembers Lori suggesting that Charles was possessed well before Lori even met Chad, but she didn't know what to make of that statement at the time. And to be fair, who would? How many of us would actually believe someone if they told us their spouse was possessed by a demon, all right? And if you did believe them, like, what would you even do with that information, you know? Gosh, if only April could have known that that was foreshadowing for what was to come. 2018 was a big year all around for Lori. Much to her chagrin, Colby and Kelsey got married, and for whatever reason, probably because Lori was a weird boy mom, Lori and Kelsey never really got along, and Lori viewed Kelsey as competition for Colby's time and attention. JJ also got a service dog named Bailey that he adored around the same time that Colby was getting married, and Lori more than likely had to clean up after and take care of this dog because JJ was severely autistic. He couldn't do it by himself, so, big stressor there. Even so, the highlight of Lori's year was a trip to Mesa for some kind of spiritual workshop and conference. Lori carpooled with some friends to the event, including Zuluma Pastines and her longtime friend Melanie Gibb. If you're familiar with the story, you'll recognize Zuluma as the wife of Alex Cox, Lori's brother. But before they were together, she was Lori's friend, and she was in plenty deep on her own, okay? This was the fateful conference, though, where our two dinglings meet for the first time. Hold on to your scissors and hooks, because this is where the timeline starts picking up and things get bumpy. The ladies in attendance carpooled to the St. George's Conference in Mesa, Arizona in late October 2018. Chad Daybell just so happened to be a speaker at this conference. According to her friends, Lori started coming on to Chad as soon as they walked up to his booth. The attraction was immediate on Chad's end as well. Within a day of meeting her, Chad informed Lori that they had been married in all of their past lives, and that they had always served Jesus closely together. He also informed Lori during this first meeting that her children had dark spirits. And weirdly, Lori was super into this. Between this first meeting and Lori's arrest, Chad claimed to be Jesus's brother in one life, the Holy Spirit in another, and St. James the Lesser in a third life. St. James the Lesser, by the way, is the apostle that discovered that Jesus was missing from his tomb. I had to look that up because I had no clue he was called St. James the Lesser. So there you go. There's your new religion fun fact for the day. But he claimed to be St. James the Lesser in a third life. He claimed Lori had been his wife in all of these past lives and that God wanted them to join together again to lead the New Jerusalem, which, Chad believed would be Rexburg, Idaho, where he lived, by the way. I can confidently tell you, though, that I would have walked away from that booth so freaking fast if the first thing the man running it told me was that he was the Holy Ghost and we needed to get married so we could prepare for the apocalypse together. That's insane talk. The first known written contact between Chad and Lori happened on October 26, 2018. The two began exchanging texts and emails, almost all flirty in nature. It took Lori only 3 months from this interaction to descend into total madness and become unrecognizable to her family. I'm not absolving Lori for what she did in any way, but I do wonder if she would have murdered her whole family without Chad's influence. One of the first absolutely unhinged things Lori did after she met Chad was cancel Charles's return flight on January 30th, 2019. Chad was away in Houston for a business trip, and the day before his flight home, Lori called and canceled his flight. She then had Alex, her older brother, go to the airport in Arizona where Charles's vehicle was parked and drive off with it. Lori and Alex then cleared out the Vallow home entirely, and Lori disappeared with Tylee and JJ. Some way, somehow, Charles made it home and is an absolute mess when he discovered that Lori took the kids. He calls the Gilbert, Arizona police and tries to explain to them what happened. In the body cam footage, you can hear how distraught and exasperated Charles is as he tries to explain that he's scared Lori's hurt the kids. He desperately tried to explain that Lori had been calling him demon-possessed and had threatened to kill him several times already. Gilbert police, though, told Charles that there's nothing they can do since Lori left with the kids while he was away at work. Basically, they said that she was within her rights as the sole guardian at the time to go wherever she wanted with the kids without notifying him. And that's bullshit. Charles wasn't having any of this, probably because he really was concerned about what Lori would do to Tylee and JJ. He had tried doing things the right way, but no one was willing to help him, so he did something that only a desperate man would do. Charles waited outside of JJ's school the next morning so he could catch Lori in the school drop-off line. He did catch her in the drop-off line, and he dove in through the window of her car and pulled her purse out, thinking that if she didn't have her ID, she couldn't go anywhere. Well, she did go anywhere. She drove off anyway, and she made her way to the police station to report the event. The footage of this interaction is so freaking frustrating to watch, okay? Lori smiles and laughs and cracks jokes during her interview, telling the officers that she's just mad that he took her lip gloss. She tells the police that she had caught Charles cheating, so she had thrown him out of the house and left to stay with her family for a while, and that all of this was just Charles throwing a tantrum because he wasn't getting his way. Basically, she admitted to doing everything Charles accused her of, minus the talk of demon possession, and the police let her walk out of the station. No charges were brought against anyone that day, though, so good for Charles? Question mark. Quickly after this debacle, Charles makes the right call and files for divorce, citing fear for his safety and the safety of his children as the reason. The papers were drafted in February 2019, right around the time Lori up and abandoned her family for 2 months. As one final low blow to her family, Lori told Charles that she didn't care about him or JJ anymore, and then she left for Hawaii. She was gone for 58 days. Even though she ignored her husband and children for 58 days, Lori remained in contact with Chad and a few of her closest friends. Do y'all remember how I keep mentioning that Chad and Lori started a pseudo cult? Well, March 2019 is about the time this cult-ish group begins to take shape, starting with the first known casting for Charles. Everything the group knew about spirituality, castings, reincarnation, enlightenment, and possession came directly from Chad Daybell. And wouldn't you know it, Charles was the first person Chad classified as a dark spirit, giving the concerned husband the nickname of Ned. The first person to die in this story is the first person that stood in the way of Chad and Lori being together. Now, let's take a moment to discuss Chad and Lori's belief system so that you have all the information you need to understand why this story is so crazy. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to refer to this whole doctrine, I guess, as light work, because that's what this group of 9 believed themselves to be, is just a group of light workers. The heart of the Lightworkers' beliefs was reincarnation. According to Chad, most souls on Earth had been reincarnated and that very few new souls are being born. Every new soul starts fresh as a low-level Lightworker. As you grow older, the choices you make and the people you surround yourself with either influence you towards the light side or the dark side. There are billions of low-level light workers and low-level dark workers, but the forces between light and dark are evenly split. Performing more light work over the course of one of your lives could result in achieving an enlightened or exalted status in your next life. And the same is true for dark work. There are also the same amount of exalted light and dark lives, but the total amount of each decreases with every level. Think of it kind of like the afterlife of the ancient Greeks. The majority of people will go to the fields of Asphodel because they simply were. Most people are just low-level, everyday Joes. Nothing super significant going on. Average light and dark worker, low level, right? A smaller number of people would go to Elysium for being good or the fields of punishment for being bad. Now you have your lower levels, exalted light and dark workers here. And fewer still reach the Isles of the Blessed or get sent to Tartarus for specialized punishment. And then in this case, that would be high-level light workers and high-level dark workers. I hope that helps put it in a better perspective for you and didn't just confuse you further. In addition to believing that people were reincarnated as light or dark souls, every soul came with a ranking system. It's with this ranking system that their ideology starts to break down and make less sense, but I think that's my fault for trying to find logic in chaos. Upon conception, every soul was given a neutral rating of 1. Shortly after birth, the new soul was now assigned a neutral 2. The first digit in the ranking system indicates which life cycle the soul is in. So a 1 means you have lived in the spirit realm only, a 2 means you have lived in the spirit realm and at least 1 life on Earth, and a 3 would denote that this is your second time on Earth, and so on and so forth until you reach a rating of 7. According to Chad, this was the highest rating an individual could achieve on either side, and there was only 1 of each. Remember, the Lightworker theology dictates that there's an equal amount of light and dark souls on Earth. I think it's also important to note that Chad does make the distinction that there are multiple worlds beyond the Earth we live on and the spirit realm. Allegedly, Chad has all the information on any lives in these other worlds as well. And of course, obviously, Chad and Lori were the highest ranking members of their group. Chad had further distinctions for his rating system, but the meaning is somewhat more ambiguous. Supposedly, there was a way for Chad to tell if someone had been exalted into the celestial kingdom, the Mormon version of the Isle of the Blessed, basically, in any other past lives, and their rank was supposed to reflect that. However, it's not exactly clearly laid out. Once again, my fault for trying to find logic in chaos. But as far as I can tell, the extra ranking is indicative of how many times an individual has been exalted, but that's just speculation. For example, I think that if the Lightworkers classified Lori or Zulema as a 4.1 or 4.2 Lightworkers, based on context clues, this would indicate that they were on their second rebirth on Earth, and they had been exalted in one past life if they were like a 4.2, I think is how that works. Once again, I don't know though. That's me trying to find logic in chaos. But just know that they had this really weird ranking system where high numbers were good as long as you were a light worker, and it just wasn't really well fleshed out. The only people who would be able to further flesh this out would be Chad and Lori though. Anyways, within the group, the 7 women had all achieved enlightenment, and they formed an inner circle that they called the 7 Gatherers. They believed their divine purpose was to perform castings, or complicated prayer rituals, really, for dark workers, and assist Chad and Lori in finding the 144,000 enlightened light workers to start the New Jerusalem. 144,000 being the number prophesied in the Christian Book of Revelations to be the number of people who will be saved during the end times. So they're mixing Norse, Mormon, and Christian theology, just one big melting pot here. Now, let's get into how all of this weird religion relates into the story. The first bit of evidence we have about these weird prayer rituals called castings is from March 2019, when Lori was in Hawaii alone. The specifics are a little hazy as to whether the group met in person or via Zoom or a mix, but Zulema Pastens did testify at Chad and Lori's trials that the 7 gatherers had performed their first casting for Charles in March 2019. The 7 gatherers consisted of Lori, Zulema, Melanie Gibb, Lori's niece, Melanie Boudreau, and 3 other women, all friends of Lori. They all gathered together to cast the demon Ned out of Charles. Chad wasn't physically present for this casting, but he was on the phone with Lori the whole time, and provided her with the instructions to give the group. Supposedly, the first casting to remove Ned had been successful, but a new and stronger demon named Garrett moved into Charles's body. At this point in time, a casting didn't necessarily result in the body dying, but the women were willing to risk the loss of life to free the soul from the torment of being stuck in limbo. So, Lexi, how does one become possessed, you ask? I would love to tell you. According to the Lightworkers, a body becomes possessed during a 2-minute window between the body dying and the soul leaving the body. Within that 2-minute time frame, a demon can move into a body, and the human soul that vacated it is held within limbo while the demon uses their body. The reanimation of these bodies with the demon spirits created zombies. But that's actually information the Seven Gatherers didn't have at this time. For now, they believed that they were exalted beings praying for a damned soul. It's unclear when Charles's body allegedly died to allow his true soul to leave and the demon to move in, though. Lori didn't offer that information, and nobody asked. Gosh, this story should really be called Lori Vallow and the Case of How Nobody Asked. Sometime after this first casting, Lori returned home to Arizona. Charles welcomed her back and stopped moving forward with divorce proceedings to try to make it work with Lori again. Love does some weird things to our brains, doesn't it? With all 7 of the gatherers in one place again, another casting was held on Charles's behalf, with Alex attending the ritual this time. Chad was still in Idaho with his family, but he conducted the casting over the phone again. This time, the 7 gatherers set out to expel the almighty demon Garrett from Charles's body. Apparently, they were super good at castings because they managed to cast out Garrett. But alas, a new demon moved in. A demon named Hiplos now inhabited Charles's body. But a regular casting wouldn't work on Hiplos because he was a high-ranking dark spirit, like ranking higher than Chad and Lori, so it just wasn't gonna work. The group no longer knew how to help Charles, but Chad assured them he'd consult with the spirit realm through the portal in his closet to find the answer. Man, there had to be something awesome about Charles's body for so many demons to inhabit it back to back like that. Like 3 in 2 months. Those are some pretty crazy numbers. Despite Charles backing down from the divorce, the couple was still separated. Charles had even had a date or two between March and July 2019. And, of course, we know that Lori had been seeing Chad, with her future 5th husband even visiting her Arizona rental home and staying with her and her friends. Zulema testified that Chad performed blessings for her and Alex during his visit. Alex received a patriarchal blessing, whatever that is, from Chad that supposedly moved him to tears. Chad had also told Alex that he was born to be Lori's protector and that he was actually an exalted soul in one of the other 9 realms. This blessing was also reportedly the first time Alex and Zulema heard from Chad that they were meant to be together. Because, reminder, at the time of all of this cult stuff, Zulema was still just Lori's friend, and her and Alex wouldn't even start dating for several months still at this point. Meanwhile, Charles was barely keeping it together. He was pretty messy. He had been trying desperately to contact the rest of Lori's family and friends and tried to explain to them that Lori was unwell and he was just begging them for help. Unfortunately, Lori's family seemed to take a hands-off approach, and most of Lori's friends were in too deep, practicing the same beliefs as Lori. Not only that, but Lori had also told, everyone they knew that Charles had been cheating on her and had threatened her, and it just created more of a wall and an obstacle for him to get through before anyone would, listen to him. Everyone except Adam Cox, the oldest Cox sibling, flat out ignored Charles and just refused to speak to him at all because they just thought he was a villain. Lori had her claws just so deep in everyone. Adam Cox seems to have distanced himself from the rest of his family. At the time of all of this, Adam was living in Kansas with his own family and was the only person willing to talk to Charles, at all. One thing the men talked about frequently was Lori's affair with Chad. You see, Lori had sent an email from Charles's account to Chad requesting that Chad visit their Chandler home to help Charles write a book. Charles was not writing a book, so to him this was a pretty clear sign of an affair. Adam actually took the screenshots from that email and sent it to Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, and told her about the suspected affair. I wish I knew what transpired in the Daybell household after that interaction. Tammy can't tell us, and Chad's kids have just distanced themselves from this entire thing, understandably so. But I kind of refuse to believe that Tammy didn't know about any of this. Maybe I hope these screenshots anyway, were the icing on the cake to prove a suspicion that she had, because if she knew that this man actually thought that there was a portal in their closet that he was talking to people through, I don't know, that's kind of sus, dude. I hope Tammy had more sense than to entertain crazy thoughts like that, but I don't know. I'm not victim shaming here. I'm not victim blaming. I find it really hard to believe that Tammy would have been totally oblivious to Chad having an affair before this moment. And I just would really have loved to have been a fly on the wall for the next week following Tammy getting these screenshots. But anyway, keep in mind, all of this happened between March 2019 and July 2019. This is a lot of drama for just 4 months. On July 11th, 2019, Charles Vallow left his house in Gilbert, Arizona to make the 15-ish minute drive to Lori's rental house in Chandler. He made it to the house around 7:20 a.m. to take 6-year-old JJ to school. Ty Lee had already gotten her GED at this point, so no one was needing to take her to school, and she was still asleep when Charles got to the house. Unfortunately, Charles wouldn't get to take his son to school one last time because Charles would not be leaving Lori's rental house alive. When Charles arrived, he found his wife and brother-in-law waiting for him in the kitchen. A fight broke out that led to Lori leaving the house with Tylee and JJ, and Alex shooting Charles in the chest. A 911 call was made at 8:36 a.m. to report a shooting in self-defense. So let's break it down. The official story goes that Charles entered the house to grab JJ, took him to the car, and when he got to the car, realized he had left his phone behind. He went back inside to get his phone, and Lori had already grabbed it and gone through it, and supposedly continued to find evidence of an affair. So a massive argument broke out between the two. Now, they're already separated. She has already made the claim that he's been cheating on her for at least a year now. She's been having her own affair for the last several months, so I don't know why she cares at this point is beyond me, but allegedly she finds evidence of an affair in his phone. That's what the argument was over, and a fight broke out. All the fighting and arguing woke up 16-year-old Tylee, who entered the kitchen area with her baseball bat to see what the commotion was. Tylee said she held the baseball bat in between the fighting couple, kinda to use it as like a barrier between them, but she stated that she never had any intentions of hitting anyone. At some point during the argument, Charles allegedly grabs the bat from Tylee and goes to swing it at Alex, who had stepped in and at this point to protect Lori. Lori and the kids rush out of the house as Charles knocks Alex in the back of the head with the bat. Alex then shoots Charles twice in the chest. Tylee reported hearing the gunshots outside of the house, but she didn't register what they were at the time. Apparently, Lori had forgotten her car keys inside and sent Tylee back inside the house for them, which, why would you do that? Why would you risk sending your child into a potentially dangerous situation? Why would you send your child into a house where you know her father was dead? Regardless, Tylee said she ran into the house to grab her mother's keys, not sparing a glance at the man who had raised her, bleeding out on the floor. While Alex sat in Lori's house with a dead Charles, Lori drove to Burger King to get JJ some breakfast before school. After dropping her son off, Lori and Tylee went to the dollar store to buy new flip-flops. Such weirdly mundane activities for immediately after a high-intensity situation like that. Alex called the emergency services around 8:36 that morning, but not before calling Lori and asking her what to do. Remember, Charles arrived at the house at 7:20 before school drop-off and had been shot before Lori had even left the house to drop off JJ. So, about an hour has passed between when Charles was shot and when Alex calls, police. When Lori and Tylee arrived back at their rental home, police had already arrived and were talking to Alex on the curb. Alex had told Chandler police that Charles had hit him in the back of the head with Tylee's baseball bat, so he had to run to the guest room where he had stayed the previous night and grab his gun, and he then shot Charles in self-defense. Lori gave a similar story, and so did Tylee, though Tylee is the only one who showed any kind of emotion about the situation. Lori and Alex were just so nonchalant and unbothered during their initial police interviews. Lori was even seen smiling in the body cam footage, which, if you're gonna commit murder, at least learn how to school your face, I guess. Come on. The strange thing about the scene is that The police discovered that the second round Charles took to the chest came after he was already lying on the floor. According to Zulema, Alex was unbothered by the shooting entirely, saying that Charles was a zombie and he'd want to be shot too if he were a zombie. And Zulema just remembers thinking that that was a really weird comment to be making. The events surrounding Charles's death are suspicious enough, but Lori's behavior immediately after is even more suspicious. Not only was she smiling in the body cam footage, but everyone she told about Charles's death got a different story. First, Lori texted her eldest son, Colby, that Charles had had a heart attack and passed away that morning, on his way to pick up JJ. Colby was racked with guilt. He hadn't spoken to Charles, whom he considered to be his father, since Lori accused him of cheating several months prior. Next, she texted Charles's grown children and told them that their dad had passed away that morning, and that was it. She didn't offer any explanation as to how he died or when, and she refused to answer her phone when her stepchildren called and refused to answer their text messages. How callous is that? That's gross. And on top of that, this cunning little worm of a woman told JJ's school that Charles had committed suicide when she informed them that JJ wouldn't be in school for a few days because, his dad died. What? Over the next few days, Lori is in contact with Chad via email and text. Their messages were all over the place, ranging from outright manipulation and admissions of guilt to weird romantic fantasy roleplay. I'm not lying when I say it's hard to read. My hat's off to the FBI agent who combed through months worth of correspondence between them. In the first few days after Charles's death, the secret couple discussed Charles's life insurance policy, which Lori didn't end up getting, and it really pissed her off, and other light and dark spirits in Lori's life. Sweet, nurturing Tylee was the next member of Lori's family to become possessed. The dark spirit that took over her body was named Hillary. While Lori herself always acted as the medium between Chad and the rest of the lightworkers, many of them, Zulema included, received blessings and special instructions from Chad that wasn't through Lori. Chad bragged about a portal to the spirit realm hidden in his closet that allowed him to receive divine visions anytime he needed to. Apparently, Chad told Zulema that he had built a similar portal in Lori's closet as well, and then went on to tell her how they communicated with each other through this weird magical portal. Chad also revealed to Zulema that JJ would die young and be reincarnated as Colby's son, and that she was predestined to marry Lori's brother, Alex Cox. I'm sure these words seemed very prophetic to Zulema, who went on her first date with Alex in August of 2019, so just later that year. It probably also seemed pretty prophetic because Colby's wife, Kelsey, was pregnant with their first child at this time. But Colby and Kelsey were having a little girl and not a little boy. I don't know if Chad knew that or if he was alluding to a future child beyond this pregnancy, but weird coincidence. And to me, it suggests that Colby was maybe not talking to his mom so much around this time for Chad to not know those specific details. Or maybe Chad and Lori weren't as close as they thought they were, because maybe Lori knew and didn't tell Chad. I guess that part doesn't really matter. Once again, I'm trying to make logic out of chaos, and the reasoning doesn't really matter. The point here is that Chad was giving all of these prophecies to Zulema specifically, and with her being really the only forthcoming member of the Seven Gatherers to base this story off of, she was painting a picture of how easy it was to get caught up in Chad's lies. She had been told that she was meant to be with Alex. A month later, they start going on a date. She was told JJ was going to be reincarnated as Colby's son, and Colby's wife is pregnant. She was laying the scene for how she got in as far as she did, I suppose. But also, I guess that doesn't really matter. I'm going to get back to it now. What was Chad doing this entire time, you ask? Just continuing to live his day-to-day life, of course. While Lori's life was in the throes of madness, Chad's life was more or less the same and went on unperturbed. That's not to say he and Tammy weren't having marital issues at this time, now that she was obviously fully aware of the affair, but largely his life was unaffected and hers was wholly affected. And that trend would continue on through the end of this case, honestly. It's really only Lori's family that had to suffer, and that's sad. And also, it's kind of frustrating that Chad continued to come home to a loving wife and a large family and continued to write his stupid little books while Tylee, JJ, and Colby were all mourning the loss of their dad, while Kay Woodcock was mourning the loss of her brother. While people had lost someone important to them because of him, he was just doing his thing. And that's just so frustrating, isn't it? Lori really knows how to pick great guys. That, my friends, is where I'm going to end part 1. Things are going to be even juicier in the next episode, and you're not going to have to wait a full month for it either. The writing process is already underway, so it should be out in a week or 2. Barring I don't have any more crazy technical failures between now and the end of September, like I did between, July and September. If you'd like to see more of my content in between episodes, I recommend checking out my TikTok. I'm fairly active on there. Thank you to my script editor, Abby, for her role in smoothing this out and her help with the research. Thank you to Mr. Crafty again for recouping everything and getting things set up so that I can hit the ground running to get things put out again. So big thank you to those guys. And you know what? Thank you to you too, my scissor sisters. I appreciate you sitting here and listening to me and crafting with me. And the next time you see me, we'll be sewing together some overalls for my toddler. Remember to choose kindness where you can, and come back soon for part 2 of Lori Vallow and the Lightworkers. Thank you so much. Granny squares are cute, but they hurt my hands. I'll be seeing you all soon. Bye.